Welcome back to the Agilisium Inside podcast. I'm Vikash Babuji, and today we are starting with a business reality in the clinical development industry. Can't ignore. Recent research shows that nearly one third of procedures and data collected in phase 2 and 3 trials are non-core or and non-essential, while phase 3 protocols now average over than 5 million data points. And over the past decade, protocol complexity has also climbed sharply with 40% increase in procedures and 200 percentage increase in data points. This results, what it shows is there are more burden on sites, more reconciliations, more on the steady teams conducting different trials, and more ways for quality risk to surface late instead it should be early. To address and to know what solution that we have in FDX initiative that Agilisium is pioneering in 2026. Today, we will explore how this FDX initiative learning program that connects domain expertise, AI thinking, and business problem solving, and a prototype led execution, which is helping a lot of our customers. And today, we have a platform or prototype to, to discuss, which is going to address the key pain point in clinical trials, which is clinical quality. Before we get into this conversation, let's welcome Balaji Tyagarajan, our FDX expert from the clinical domain. Welcome to the show, Balaji. Thanks for giving us your time.
Hi Vikash, thanks for having me in the FDX podcast series. Looking forward to share more insights with you and having a great conversation.
So, Balaji, before we get into the prototype, right, and more about the discussion that we have planned to have on the clinical quality, right? Tell us about your domain background and how that experience positioned you to understand, especially this pain point about the clinical quality, just not as a process issue. Everyone thinks it is a process issue, but as a business problem.
Absolutely, Vikash. My background has been in clinical operations, especially in quality facing environments, where I've been dealing with quality issues that rarely confines with the compliance protocols. And what starts as a deviation, right, as a documentation gap or a delayed CAPA often becomes a much bigger business issue because it slows down the decision and it also increases the operational burden and creates risk much later in the study life cycle. So over the time, it gave me a practical view of clinical quality, not just as a control function, but as something that directly affects the speed, visibility, readiness, and confidence across different programs in clinical trial.
That's really great. So this FDX initiative and the FDX training is not like a traditional one where most of the organization has, right? So from your perspective, how does it work as a learning program, and what changes when SMEs are taught to connect domain depth, AI thinking, and real business problem through prototypes and addressing the problem itself, right? Can you share something on that part, please?
Yeah, actually, that's a very important point because FDX is not just about learning a new tool set. What makes it valuable is that how it teaches an SME to think differently. It starts with a domain understanding, but then later it pushes through you see the business problem and understand how AI can add more value, and the value proposition later can be translated into an actual useful solution for the real world context. So from my perspective, FDX works as a learning program because it helps domain people to improve their expertise with insights and execution with a very structured and business relevant way, Vikash.
Okay, so this gives us a strong sense of Agilisium and FDX perspective, right? Now let's bring this closer to the users. So this prototype that you have built, and we wanted to really explore on that part and the operating reality they deal every day, right? So let's discuss and let's define a persona wise, right, or a user journey wise. If the primary user of a clinical quality platform that you have built, who's it is going to be? Like, is it going to be a clinical quality lead or a sponsor from the CRO point? What does their day actually look like? Like, where do the biggest decision making gaps show up?
Yeah, if we think about the primary user as a clinical quality lead, so their day typically is been pulling together the data signals and from different sources and trying to make sense of how they can act around it. So they're looking at the TM of health, the deviations, the CAPA progresses, and the inspection readiness, and some indicators also with a cross-functional risk that they come across. But usually not in a connected view, it is diversified across different source systems. So the biggest decision making gap comes from the fragmentation pieces. So they often know their risk, but they definitely don't know how to resolve the risk. So what we propose from Clinical QC Studio is we can also intervene the respective issue and also fix it and help them to track it better.
Okay. So, Balaji, I also wanted to understand this better because you have the domain expertise. Now you have an AI-led thinking, and you are building prototype from the from front end prototyping and the back end prototyping using bytecode and so on and so forth, right? As an FDX from the clinical team, what becomes visible about the workflow that outsiders usually miss, especially around delays, hands off, and the cost of fragmented quality intelligence. Share some insights on this, please.
So yeah, what becomes more visible here, right? The quality workflow is still dependent on the manual coordination or manual reconciliation process. Even to make a simple insight, to understand it, to digest that, and later make a decision around it takes a lot of time because the full picture is actually scattered across your platter. But what an FDX can add more value here is there is three cardinal features in this FDX journey that I've been going through. One is the AI component, the agent will play a major role, and number two is the a human in the loop, and three is how we propose this by validating it. So when these three cardinal features comes into picture, the FDX will definitely enable the automation process in a very streamlined and structured way, because the domain training, the domain expert that undergo into the respective section, right, it's very vast. At the same time, the toolkit from the technology point of view will enable the relevant knowledge and relevant skill that is needed to develop a solution, because
So and that's where the issue becomes much more concrete, right, Balaji? Not just as a compliance concern, but as a real business challenge. Before we unpack what is the prototype that you have for us, I also wanted to know. I saw the prototype. It is good. It is brilliant. I saw that, especially the dashboards that you have created for the executive view. It's fascinating. But how long did it take? Because I understand traditionally building such prototypes. First, there are three phases, right? There's going to be a lot of research. So you need to understand the market, you need to understand the industry problem. That's going to be your research, and then you're going to put this down into a whiteboard, right? So this whiteboarding basically, you're going to validate your concerns. You're going to validate the user journey. You're going to validate the decision quality there. And then you go for development, the prototype. For me, traditionally doing all of this, multiple teams used to do this. And then it takes, say, 3 to 6 months to get the actual product out, right? And there's a cost involved, there's a time involved, there's an effort involved. I wanted to understand how long did it take for you to build this prototype after getting into the FDX initiative and the learning group.
indeed, it is a business problem. But the main reason the problem is getting harder day by day is simply because of the trial complexity that has been increased over the years significantly, Vikash. Because many organizations manage the quality as not as evolved in the same pace, because the industry research typically shows around one third of procedures where the data collected from phase 2 and phase 3 trials are considered as non-core and non-essentials. But at the same time, these all segments have around 5.96 million data points, which means they have the potential to help you to enable the relevant insight that you wanted to compile and create a quality control around it. But when you ask what is the difference when you enable an FDX journey in this approach, typically, traditionally, it involves around 3 to 6 months, as you rightly pointed. But in the modernized approach with an FDX journey, it will definitely help you to build something within 6 to 7 days. You can build a solid prototype. Building a prototype is pretty easy with the technology relevance that we have, but what is needed more is understanding the research and understanding the protocol structures and the downstream data from it. Once we understood the downstream data from it, it is definitely easy for us to enable what data points can enable the junctions, and once the junctions are identified, we can definitely build a quality system with relevance to the governing body of the respective geographical location.
Okay. Balaji, correct me if I'm wrong. So to build this prototype, crossing all these three phases end to end, it just took 7 days for you.
Yeah, I'm just being brutally honest. 7 working
Okay.
days.
7 working days. That's really great. But you are right. Anyone with an AI tech stack can build a prototype, but only an FTX can build a prototype which sits close to the decision makers, right? So I really appreciate the effort that you have put into the clinical QC platform. But how does this work in a structural problem, right? When a structural problem shows up differently from sponsors, from the CROs, or in the site networks as well, right? Why does the clinical quality lead still end up carrying the coordination burden, right? When I speak of coordination, I also wanted to highlight the specific pain point, right? Do you see all of this as just a software development? Is it going to be a traditional software development, or what AI features or recommendations or suggestions that has come along with the clinical QC platform?
Yeah, I think the complexity itself relies from the site quality lead or a clinical quality lead, because they are focused to collect data from different geographical location. Because so different geographical location by default has different systems. So the collection of data itself is a huge problem. But in the recent data engineering modernization, we have pathways to enable them, but we don't have pathways to correlate and build an data warehouse within an web app. But in clinical QC Studio, right, we don't just analyze and produce insights where a typical AI journey will map. But with an FDX learning pathway, we are also encoding the requirements on typically how a clinical quality lead will function, because our stakeholders, our user persona are being interviewed, and we elicit a proper requirement from how the typical day looks. Based on that, we resonate with their journey, and then we try to build something. For instance, I'll pick one example here: protocol document. Protocol document is a, it's a study level document. It is been iterated for multiple versions and multiple amendments. All the versions can, even a single word is changed, it might be improvised to another version of iteration. So not just on version and auditability, even the font, the structure, the template, the core schedules of activities that are being mentioned in the protocol, everything needs to be latest, and recency of the report should be maintained. So this becomes very complex if it is done across multiple states, if it's like a country level study or a continent level study. So not just tracking the information from protocol, but also helping to identify the errors, the indications, and flagging the indications. And it also moves as a responsible AI one step ahead. It suggests the errors and helps you to fix the errors also, Vikash.
Okay, when we speak about the protocol digitalization, right? I'm sure the FDA would have multiple protocols, right? Multiple protocols across multiple drugs, right? How agnostic is this in addressing this pathway?
So this ClinQC Studio is completely study driven, Vikash, because let's say we have our partner operating around 80 to 90 clinical trials study. So we can segment the 80 to 90 as a portfolio and organize them. So this 80 to 90 protocols can have 130 or 150 iterations of amendments and version, but still when a study arm or a study is extended, respective the procedure from phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trial, throughout the end-to-end journey, not just from patient-centric, of also from clinical administrative-centric, the entire journey happens in the ClinQC Studio. So this does not act as a catalyzer, but also act as a one-stop solution which will help you to navigate your end-to-end workflow into it. When we integrate the workflow, definitely the business problem is addressed in the right way to track and resolve it, Vikash.
Okay, so this brings up another question, right? How are we from CTMS? There are a lot of CTMS there in industry in the market, and the RBQMS platforms, right? One is for the risk and one is for the management, right? So how is it different, or is it still the same?
It's definitely different, I would say, because this is a customized prototype, customized solution, and this can be deployed at the infra level, at the customer's partnered ecosystem. What is the difference that it creates, or what value add from a typical traditional CTMS is the CTMS managing system. What it does is it will store the information across different system. Maybe it could be visit wise, or it could be site wise. And also it manages some set of other clinical operations related information. But what ClinQC Studio additionally performs is it will also store the data and help you to navigate the errors. And once it identify the errors, it will also create a fixing pathway to fix it and then save it. There is also an archiving option which a CTMS wouldn't provide in an easiest go. So we can also revisit and track changes, like simply how we can perform an undo action in the Excel tab, right? So that's how simple it is for them to track and enable it on the go.
Let's talk about the adoption, right? Especially there are multiple reports says industry adoption of risk-based quality management is still incomplete. And what does that tell you? And what is the operational cost when an organization stay reactive instead of being continuous, right? I wanted to understand this even more better.
I think in the past 2 to 3 years, slowly the digital protocol and the digitalization of the entire clinical phase one and phase two, also the phase three, certainly improvising, I would say. But on the clinical quality area, still the reconciliation aspect of adoption is being well proven. Fixing the quality issues like identifying whether the document is attributable, whether the documents are legible, whether the document date and digital signature are specified. So all this minor information kind of hallucinates the current AI co-pilot or any other model we have. So we need an advanced responsible AI action in picture where this loops works on a feedback mechanism. So when the feedback mechanism is provided to a ClinQC lead for the ClinQC Studio operation, probably he or she can be trained, and all they need is a 30 minutes quick training. And post training, they can probably plug in and play with the respective systems, and they can track their study life cycle in a end-to-end journey, Vikash.
That's really great, Baji. Let's move to the next segment. We understood the market gap. We understood what is the industry facts, and also why did you come up with this solution? And the prototype that you built took less than 7 days. That's what you said from the training or the learning that you got from the FDX initiative. Let's take a just step back and see from a clinical trial lead, right? Or a clinical quality lead through their lens at an highest level. What is this clinical QC platform and what does it help? How does it help in their day-to-day life? When I say life, in their day-to-day work and in today's environment.
Okay, at a high level, ClinQC Studio is a quality control end-to-end workflow management platform. Because certainly it helps one to audit and trace their data sources and data points, and along with that, it has a certain set of indications. It flags the quality relevant indication. It picks up from the geographical location, be it from FDA or any other governing body, what could be the quality measures, and the threshold is being optimized with the quality measure, and the quality measure is iterated with various set of assessment that comes along with the data. And when this data is iterated with the current real-time data records that they have, it provides the indication and it also flags the error. And once the error is confirmed by a human in the loop, that's the clinical quality lead, probably he or she can fix it and also audit and trace it on the go, because and it is a broader focus, I would say. It resolves around the quality workflow journey, Vikash.
Okay, when you say the journey, does this platform also generate discharge summaries?
Not really, because this will give you notifications and indications for a particular patient journey. If a patient is not signed the informed consent form to be part of the clinical trial, so the notification with the patient alphanumeric UHID will be identified and showcased, but definitely it will not generate any discharge summary. That is still not the scope of the use case, Vikash.
Okay, but it also clears another gap, right? So you cannot keep everything autonomous and automated in a sensitive industry like this, right? Some function or operation should have an human in the loop mechanism. I get that. That's why I wanted to surface this question up. So, what are the core prototype capabilities that matters most for the business standpoint, especially deviation, clustering, readiness monitoring, and the cross signal visibility? We haven't spoken about the signals yet, but I just wanted to understand from that point.
I think the signaling is not about the insights or a typical dashboard journey for us to see, grab the juice around the data, and then make some decisions. It will give an end-to-end quality decisions signals, Vikash, because the design of the UI is going to be working in such a way that it captures the signals from ETMF, EDC, CTMF, and the CAPA records. When all these four are integrated, the indications and the signaling, right, just a fragment in a operational governed way. When I say governed way, the scaling model can be more broad across studies and across functions. So imagine when we are developing a dashboard for to see insights for 2 to 3 functions, but we have a ClinQC Studio which will scale a model driven broad function across 80 to 90 studies, because so this is something huge what we are discussing here. The signals and the patterns and the deviation logs that are being captured provides immense infra level setup, but ClinQC Studio helps you to optimize that particular component also.
Okay. So, Balaji, does it also give an historical records? I know there are multiple data integrations that's happening. I'm talking from a pharmacovigilance point of view, right? What is some X clinical trial done 6 months back and same component, but there is same component but different geography with different patient life cycle, right? So how do we connect this? Does this platform also connect this?
Definitely, there is a recommendation engine I've enabled in this prototype, Vikash. For example, let's say a patient is enrolled at US, and the same particular study is operated in Europe, and another patient is getting recruited in Europe. But if the early signals are being picking the pattern, if the potential the patient could be probably dropped because of the documentation delay or the documentation errors, the early signals is a pattern. It captures the common anomalies. When I say common anomalies, the data point we are trying to discuss here. So the common anomaly always produces a base level insight, but definitely a quality lead should be the right person to validate whether and take the decision whether to continue the patient journey or probably send a notification to the quality lead in the respective Europe or US location and see and do a follow-up reminder with the patient, because
Okay. So let's talk about the ground reality here, right? So if a client wanted to implement something like this, what would be a practical roadmap look like from discovery through pilot to a scale deployment?
I think realistically, the outcomes the client should expect is a better signal detection here, and also a strong prioritization and reduced manual reconciliation efforts also. And when we move forward with a continuous approach to the readiness and the oversight of the document, when the customer wants to take ownership, definitely Clean QC Studio is something that they always wanted to, because it will take the end-to-end ownership of the workflow. Because so far we have been seeing solutions solving one particular sub area or sub area in the life science division in clinical trials, but this will optimize the entire clinical quality piece itself altogether. So the opportunity is very strong, that's what I'm trying to say, but the rollout has to be governed in a usable way and also aligned how teams actually work. So it should also be user friendly, because so that's the entire purpose of ClinQC Studio.
Okay. So I understand the governance part of it and the basic requirement about an implementation that you are recommending. That's fine. I wanted to know the prototype is built, right? The prototype is built. Now to take it and implement in customer place, in customer environment, right? You should have a practical roadmap for it, right? So how do you conduct this? How do you do it as an FDX? I understand you would have a different roadmap comparative to a traditional roadmap of how you implement solutions or projects.
This is definitely what every customer would like to see. Practical roadmap would start with the discovery, with a real understanding of the business problem. The targeted user or the decision maker, right? The next step will be understanding the workflow and optimizing it. You need to see the quality decisions that are made before you redesign them. After the data assessments comes across different systems like EDC and CTMS or ETMF and CAPA records, then you move into the customization of the logic on how the user views and follows the focused pilot approach. If the pilot proves more value, the next steps is optimization and having a governing layer around it, and then having a scaling model for broadly that can penetrate across different studies and also the study related function, because
But I'm also seeing what are the governance that you're bringing in, right? So I know you have built a prototype, but I know you have also kept a human in the loop mechanism. But this is a regulated environment, right? Especially clinical trials is a regulated environment. Outcomes are only meaningful. I strongly believe in that. Outcomes are only meaningful if you have a strong governance in place, right? So what about the data privacy? What about the complaints? What about the accuracy? And AI is being a major part here. What about the AI accuracy? Can you elaborate more on this?
definitely, because governance is definitely a important point in quality areas. But because it is regulated, right, and the environment, the speed control, the usability, and the turnaround time is definitely an important crucial factors here. So the way we approach ClinQC Studio was a governed augmentation layer is not as an unmonitored automation. That means thinking about role-based access and privacy-safe data handling techniques and traceable outputs and auditable outputs, and the validation of AI-supported classifiers and clear human review at decision points makes more value to it. In clinical research, trust comes not just as a capability, but from explainability, accountability, and fit for purpose use, Vikash.
You also have a governance uh, module or a framework within the QC platform, or is an industry standard operation of the AI guardrails one platform or a one AI agent or a tool should have? Like, how does this map?
Yeah, definitely we have a governed layer of responsibility. Many studies focusing on quality related functions with AI support. When I got an opportunity through the FDX journey to understand the research workflows, it really helped me to build a customized framework for ClinQC Studio, because this is a very niche segment what we are talking about here, Vikash, because this needs more resonance for the quality leads to operate, and we should also think about what are the areas they're supporting manually, and whether just automating the areas that are can solve the problem. Definitely not. We are trying to map the data endpoints. If there is too much of data, there is a term called data paralysis in clinical, that they call it. They have too many data, but they definitely don't know how to operate with that. But ClinQC is enabling you that operation. So it's not just an automation; it's a basic operations which will be led from an operational and an automation approach.
What outcome should the customer or the client should realistically expect, right? And there's an adoption risk. So when we talk about any new things, right, any new innovation or new things that is getting onboarded through the procurement team, the IT has to adopt, the business has to adopt. So what is the adoption challenge, and what is the change management challenges that need to be addressed? I know most of the FDX are supporting Agilisium with the Life Science DNA podcast, which has many leaders sharing their perspective in AI, in life science, across different value chain, and everyone speaks about the change management and risk management in the adoption. Right, these are very crucial, and this cannot be happen overnight, right? Especially adoption and change management, right? So you cannot set a process and you have to do that. You cannot set a mandate, and that's what I understand from most of the leaders that they share their perspective in Life Science DNA podcast, right? As an FDX, how much of the FDX training or how much of you in person, right, personally aware of the change management, and do you have any strategy to do that? And do you have the adoption? How about the adoption? Do you have any upskilling to accomplish these two aspects?
Realistically, right, the outcome the client should expect is better signals here, and a strong prioritization, and reduced manual reconciliation. That's on the outcome part. But as an FDX, what we act as a catalyzer is we help them to analyze the opportunity in a very stronger manner, in a very confident manner, with a governed and usable and aligned approach. Because the actual work involves conducting interviews and understanding the pain points, but we never stop only with that. We move ahead. We also help them to enable what are the areas, and we also build a prototype, and we take feedbacks whether this can resolve. These signals can be helpful for the quality team that are operating from different geographical locations. I think that's where the output efficiency, what we are able to drive with the FDX, right? That's where we are gaining more confidence from the customers directly, Vikash. But for me, the broader message is, as an FDX, it enables the ability to act as a real domain insight leader, where we can always have AI as a value add, and domain people as a validation enabler to audit them. CleanQC is one of the example in that direction, because it is governed and very practical and built for real operational value here.
Okay. So, correct me if I'm wrong. So this is more than an implementation. You have a prototype, and the customer wants to implement this prototype in his workflow. Be it any customer, right? You are not going to act as an just as an implementation partner, or nor you're going to do a managed service. I know it's a combination of everything, but you are also going to be a pivotal person who's going to support them in change management, in adoption. Correct me if I'm wrong. If am I right?
Definitely, you're right, Vikash, because traditionally, right, when we step back, when there is a new requirement, let's say we have a dashboard or an AI chatbot within the web app. If there is a new requirement, let's say the clinical quality lead does not want this particular dashboard or this particular signal detection visual stuff, what they will request is they will approach a new requirement, and once the new requirement transfer, that's a whole new journey in the servicing industry. But ClinQC Studio will definitely not enable the new requirement as a new workflow itself. It tries to integrate with what we have within the system. So that's where the adoption plays a crucial role, right? When a clinical QC lead wants to have a iteration of improvements for the visual they see or the signals that they have been identifying and they're indicating, if they want to understand it, if they want to change a different visual for a different team members for the, because the outcome is different and the need is different, all of it is possible with ClinQC Studio. Because so the adoption is definitely not going to be super delayed. All they need is a bit amount of training, how to map the user journey, and then we can enable it. Because
Okay. So I'm also asking Balaji, are you going to be end to end? For example, I want the clinical QC studio for my team, and my team size is around 30 plus, right? Assuming it's a 30 plus team. So I'm talking about this chain of adoption, this chain of uh, uh, change management. They are used to certain other tools. They are used to traditional way of doing it. How are you going to? I know the application is user friendly and it can be customizable and all that. How as an FDX you're going to support this part?
as an FDX, my support will be through being available and accountable for different information. Because when we are talking about a group of 30 from a quality department, we might have physicians, we might have quality standard and regulatory standard experts. So as an FDX, it enables me with the terminologies and thought process as part of my training. Along with that, I'm upgrading myself with the relevant toolkits, and this also enables me acting as a tech savvy candidate. This particular approach on being a domain candidate plus a technical candidate, it will help me to not just educate them but also help them to resonate with me and clarify the doubts that they wanted. So this FDX is not just enables it, it also helps you to transform their end-to-end journey for a user till the B user from the clinical quality team, Pikash.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thanks so much for addressing this, Balaji. So, if you had to summarize the broader message of clinical QC in one thought, what does it say about the future of clinical quality operations and how Agilisium through FDX wants to build the future?
The broader message is the future of quality operations has to be more continuous and more connected and also more decision oriented. Because the complexity is increasing day by day, the quality leaders need better ways to see the risk and also act with more confidence. What FDX enables at Agilisium is the ability to take real domain insight and connect it with the AI thinking and turn it up into beautiful prototypes that can act as a ground catalyzer in the business problem. So as I said, ClinQC Studio is not just enabling them some particular areas. It's a complete end-to-end workflow prototype. It acts as a studio where you can come manage your end-to-end solution. It is a centralized consortium for the clinical quality system, Vikash.
What I understand and what stands out to me in this conversation is how clearly it is connecting the dots between industry-wide challenge, a real user pain point, and a practical prototype response. So that's what makes this more than a technology story, right? It's a business story about better decisions, better visibility, and of course, better quality operations.
So the better quality operations is definitely going to be through the FDX journey. Is the one pathway which enabled me that, Vikash.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time, Balaji. Thank you, listeners. Until next time, this is Vikash Babuji signing off. Thank you so much.